everyone. This is the Crime Cafe, your podcasting source of great crime, suspense, and thriller writing. I'm your host, Debbi Mack. Before I bring on my guest, I'll just remind you that the Crime Cafe has 2 ebooks for sale, the 9-book box set and the short story anthology. You can find the buy links for both on my website, debbimack.com, under the Crime Cafe link. You can also get a free copy of either book if you become a Patreon supporter. You'll get that and much more if you support the podcast on Patreon, along with our eternal gratitude for doing so. But first, let me put in a good word for Blueberry Podcasting. I'm a Blueberry affiliate, but that's not the only reason I'm telling you this. I've been using Blueberry Podcasting as my hosting service for my podcast for years, and it's one of the best decisions I ever made. They give great customer service. You're in complete control of your own podcast. You can run it from your own website, and it just takes a lot of the work out of podcasting for me. I find for that reason that it's a company that I can get behind 100% and say, you should try this. Try Blueberry. It doesn't require a long-term contract, and it's just a great company, period. And it also has free technical support by email, video, and phone, so you can get a human being there. Isn't that nice? Hi, everyone. My guest this week is the founder and managing partner of DuBois Levias Law Group, one of Washington State's longest-standing woman-owned law firms. Before becoming a family law attorney, a field I learned to avoid like the plague, frankly, she was a labor and delivery nurse. She uses her medical and legal knowledge to address inequities in the legal system as an author of the Camille Delaney Mystery Series, an award-winning book series. Her third and latest book is called Unshackled. She also founded an organization that helps formerly incarcerated people to re-enter society. What a laudable goal. And I just finished reading the script for The Shawshank Redemption. So what interesting timing. Anyway,
Wow.
I'm pleased to have with me today the author, Amanda DuBois. Hi, Amanda. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. I want a copy of that script. How interesting that would be.
Oh, I can probably send you the link to where it was found,
Oh, fantastic.
or
Oh,
even a
that's
copy.
why you were
Yeah.
reading that.
Oh, it's kind of cool to read it.
Yeah, I
And
bet.
and I didn't have a chance to actually watch the movie. We were doing the discussion on it, and I hadn't had a chance to see it in a long time, but it seemed like there were scenes in there that might not have made it into the movie, which was interesting.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly right.
It was very interesting to read, but I am always pleased to have a lawyer on who has written crime fiction. I'm just pleased to see lawyers writing fiction, frankly, in general. And you have done some remarkable work starting your own law firm. How long have you had your own law firm?
So I'm just this year celebrating 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah, and so that makes us one of Seattle's longest standing women-owned law firms. So
That's really
we've
awesome.
been celebrating kind of all year. We have a little pontoon boat outside our office because our office is on a lake, and we just did this like champagne thing, you cork the champagne off, and yeah, we've been having a good time celebrating. So
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Um, I think I can hazard a guess as to what led you from delivering babies to law. Perhaps the absolutely broken healthcare system in this country had something to do with it?
well, a little bit. Yeah, mostly I just wanted to do something different. And here's a really funny story how I ended up in law is I wanted to get out of nursing and I thought I'd go to medical school. So I went, took all the super hard science classes, and then I decided I didn't really like that, just like 2 years of biochemistry and all that stuff. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll go get an MBA. And so I went to buy the MBA study guide book at the bookstore. And right next to that was the law school book. And I thought, well, I'll buy that. I'd never thought about law school. So I went home and I was doing the MBA study book. And it was all this math and calculus. And it was really hard. And I thought, this is awful. So I got a beer and sat down and did the law school study book. And I'm like, oh, this is much easier. So my husband came home and I said, I'm going to go to law school. And he goes, what? I said, well, I'm not good at this MBA stuff. It's too much math, and I'm really good at this law school. So they must have a better idea about what would make a good lawyer. So I was totally the accidental lawyer. I had no interest really in being a lawyer at all. But I thought I had the aptitude. So anyway, I ended up in law school and ended up as a medical malpractice lawyer for the first 7 years of my practice. So once I got into law school, I thought, okay, I gotta, work on this healthcare system. So you're right.
Oh, wow. Wow, that is really interesting. There are so many similarities between you and me in terms of background. I had this hard science background for a while, and then the math killed me. And I was
Right?
like, oh no, no, I can't do this. I was really interested in physics for some reason. And then it was
Me
just
too.
like, wow, how
I always in
interesting.
my other life, I want to be like an astrophysicist or somebody,
Oh
kind
boy,
of a math
yeah.
genius or something, but it's not happening in this lifetime. So here we are.
Here we are.
Here
Yeah.
we are writing books.
Here, I am a would-be cosmologist. You're a would-be astrophysicist. I want to know about the origins of the universe. How did this all start anyway?
Right. We'll never know.
Um, so how would you describe your books? Are they kind of like crime fiction? Where are they in the spectrum of who done it to stop the bad guy before it happens?
So they're legal thrillers.
Legal
And
thrillers.
so the protagonist is a lawyer named Camille Delaney. And the reason I wrote the first book was because I was a trial lawyer and I was super frustrated with how we value human lives in the legal system. Like if you're a young, bank president and you die, you're worth millions of dollars. But if you're a 65-year-old retired person and you die because of malpractice, you're worth way less than that. And it bothered me because when I was a nurse, whoever comes into the hospital, they're an important, like you don't treat bank presidents different than you treat old people or vice versa. And every human life has the same amount of value in the medical system. So I end up in the legal system where people's value is basically based on what they can earn. And it really bothered me. And I was a medical malpractice lawyer for many years. And I wanted to write an article or like inform people about this injustice. And I thought, nobody's going to read a dumb article about the value of human life in the legal system. Like, who's going to read that? And I thought, well, maybe I could write a fiction book, and it's going to be about an old guy who dies. And it's going to be about the protagonist who is struggling with trying to communicate to the insurance company and the defendants that the widow deserves more money than just the amount of money you'd give to some old guy who died. So the whole purpose of the book was to sort of expose this really horrible way that the legal system has with dealing with human lives. And then the
Mm-hmm.
next book was about a baby who died because they do the same thing to babies. They say, oh, you could always have another one. And it's like, what are you talking about? So the second book is about a baby who died. So, and then the protagonist, and it's a mystery. So you're trying to figure out, it's a fun mystery, but at the end of it, I'm hoping that the readers are like, wow, I never really thought about that before. So I use the legal thriller sort of genre to talk about inequities in the legal system. And then the third book is set in the about women in prison who have been separated from their children and the importance of reuniting women with their children when they're in prison and after they get out of prison. And so and that book, when you get finished with that it's like, oh my God, I had no idea the struggles and the impact on our society and our communities when we incarcerate moms
Mm-hmm.
because their kids become at risk, and then those kids are, more likely to get into trouble in the legal system in the future. And so this book, while it's a story about a kidnapped baby that the protagonist and her private detective have to find the baby, all along the way, you're learning things about, the criminal legal system and how messed up it is. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's
for
kind of
sure.
that's the high level what these books are about.
Yeah. Did you find that changing from writing legal briefs and documents to writing fiction required any kind of adjustment in the way you wrote
You
or
know,
thought about writing?
Not really, because I never really thought about this before, but if you're writing a good trial brief or a good motion, you have to convince the reader that it's true. And you have to I'm a family law lawyer, right? So when I'm writing a motion or doing a trial, it's about a family and a child and, money and finance and all these things that are kind of a little bit exciting. I mean, they sound kind of smutty and dramatic and emotional for most lawyers, but it's really pretty fun. And you are like writing this family's story to present it to a judge. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's it's different in terms of obviously a lot longer in a book, but it's very similar in the way of I mean, having been a lawyer for so long, I think it makes me kind of a better writer because I've had to tell true people's stories to judges, both in writing and verbally for the past 30 years. So it's a good question, but it's really, I'm sure if I was a lawyer for banks or Microsoft or something, I wouldn't have the same thing to say. But when I'm telling family stories, yeah,
That's
absolutely.
true. That's very true. I was going to say, in my tendency was to over-explain things at first. It's like, no, no, you don't have to explain that the sky is blue because of. And I didn't do it that badly, but it was just,
Yeah, it's a
oh
lot.
yeah, oh, gosh, I'm thinking like a lawyer, not like a fiction writer at this point. So I'm
Well,
thinking
we're
like
not
both.
exactly writing fiction, but we're writing stories.
We're
And
writing
if you're
stories.
good at it, you convince a judge that you're right.
That's it.
What is
Yeah.
similar?
It's not the same thing as writing fiction, yeah. Um, but you draw on storytelling ability. That's what it comes down to.
Mhm.
And that's one
Exactly.
of the things that always attracted me about law school. I thought, what a great place to learn more stories.
Well, and
What a
all of the
wealth.
people that you meet and all of the stories that you hear, it's just, and they all weave in, like every time you read a book characters, there's a little bit of somebody in there, right? They're not just, they didn't come out of nowhere.
Exactly, yeah. Do you have a plan in terms of how long you want to write the series or where you would like it to go?
Well, I've got a million stories. So, um, over the years, I wrote the first Camille Delaney mystery like 20 years ago, and I got like a New York agent and the whole thing, and then it kind of fizzled. And then I re-upped it during COVID and got a publisher, and so I had to update that book. So
Mm,
the first two I had written a long time ago. The third one I just wrote in the past several years. But between when I was a trial lawyer and now, I have a huge I've had a huge opportunity to get to know people in the criminal legal system because I started this nonprofit that helps people when they get out of prison. And so I've learned about inequities in the legal system that I couldn't have ever have imagined because I'm like a privileged white lady divorce lawyer. I'm not someone who spends a lot of time in prisons or I wasn't. And now that I am, and I learned the stories of the people and how it got them there, I feel really compelled to fictionalize them because I think it's so much easier for people to develop empathy and to relate to a character who's going through a real life type problem from the perspective of writing fiction. And so, like the book I'm working on right now is going to be like a domestic violence survivor who kills her abuser, because that's really, you go into the women's prison and ask those women how many of them have been sexually abused,
mm,
85% of them. They're all trauma
wow.
survivors. And what are we doing putting them in prison? I don't understand. It's like they don't belong in prison, they belong in therapy.
Seriously. Oh,
So
my gosh. Are you familiar with a publication? I think it's called the Marshall Report. Trying to think what it's
is that
called.
part of the, yeah, yeah, I think so.
They are always reporting on prisoner situations.
Well, there's a million of them. And you could just think of all the stories that you can, you know, tell about people whose lives have taken Brian Stevenson, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a super famous lawyer who started the Equal Justice Initiative and he helped represents people on death row. And he says, we're all better than the worst thing we've ever done.
Mm,
And it's true. So like when I meet people who have either in prison or who have recently come out of prison, they're basically not that different than you and I, but they, may have done something really wrong. Or most of the women in prison are there because they're sexual abuse survivors. They end up, they can't afford therapy because they're not in that demographic like maybe we are, where if you were abused or something, you go to therapists. So they end up ultimately getting on street drugs. And they say that, when I first took meth, it made me feel safe and I felt comfortable. And I felt first time I felt like I was okay. And so they self-medicate with street drugs, which isn't obviously is a horrible path to go down because then you end up doing property crimes to support your street drug habit and then you end up in prison. But you're not there because you woke up one morning and decided to break into a car. You're there because you have this horrible childhood and horrible childhood experience. And I feel like we all need to understand that better because then their children, then you take the mothers away from their children, and then their children become at risk in our society because those are the kids who end up in trouble. So it's a community safety issue. So anyway,
Yes.
so I write these stories about, you know, kind of real, not, they're not true stories, but they're real life stories.
Informed by things that you've experienced.
Yeah, and then the other part about it for me being a lawyer and writing is because some people will say, you must have to do so much research. And I'm like, I don't have to do any research. I've been in the courtroom. I know exactly when I'm describing a courtroom and the wire hangers and the weird that floor that's made of the, I can't remember, like the linoleum floors and the mismatched chairs and the pews that are kind of sticky because they've been there for a million years. I mean, I've done that for so many years. And so,
Wow.
and most of the stories that I tell are stories that I've heard from my friends. And so once in a while, like I had to do research in this last book because I've never done a CR7 motion to vacate a criminal record. So I had to talk to my friend who runs the Innocence Project up here in Seattle to help with some of the technical stuff. But it's fun for me to write courtroom scenes because since Zoom, we're all lawyering on Zoom now, and so we don't go into the courtroom as much. So it's kind of bittersweet to write the scenes of the lawyers in the courtroom and the,
Oh, wow.
problems with the audiovisual equipment and tripping over the wires and all the crazy things that happen during a trial. So they're pretty real.
So most courtroom proceedings now are taking place on Zoom?
In Seattle, in family law, we're all on Zoom.
Wow.
We went on Zoom
There's
during
so much that's
COVID.
changed
Well, we went on
since.
Zoom during COVID,
Uh-huh.
and then this is kind of a funny story. So one of the judges I was talking to, he was saying, you know how the courtrooms are set up where the judge sits up here and the
Mm-hmm.
witness sits over here and then the jury's over there. So the witnesses are sitting facing away from the judge because they're supposed to be talking to the jury. But in family law, there's no jury. And so the witnesses sit here and the judge sits up here and the witness talks to the lawyer over there. And the judge was saying, I spent 20 years listening to family law cases, looking at the back of the witnesses' heads. And now on Zoom, I see them full on face and I can get a much better feel for the people looking them in the face on a Zoom than I ever could in the courtroom. And I had never thought it was really
That,
weird. So
yeah, that's a great point. And it's a very interesting point. I hope writers are listening and taking notes here.
yeah, it's
If you're
all,
in Washington State, at least in domestic law, take
yeah.
notes.
And
And
the
I,
other thing is access to justice, because like in a family law, it's hard to get. I don't know if anybody knows, and most courthouses are downtown and you got to park. And if grandma's going to come and testify or somebody like that, and you got to get them downtown and you got to get them in a parking garage and you got to get them down the street and up the elevator and through the security in the courthouse. And so that and then she sits out in the hall for like an hour waiting for a term versus grandma's sitting in her living room and you call her up and say, turn on your camera. We're on Zoom now. And she's on and off in 15 minutes. And so the judges have kind of decided in family law, it's an access to justice thing, that it's easier for people to access the legal system on Zoom than it is to have to go through all of the hoops to actually get down to the courthouse. Isn't that interesting?
that, yeah, that is very interesting. It also saves the client a little bit of money if you're
A lot of
charged by the
money.
hour.
I
A
mean,
lot of money.
imagine you're paying an expert witness like, $800 an hour to sit out in the hall outside the
Exactly.
courtroom until they testify. Yeah, it's totally different now.
Wow. This is like mind blowing for me because now I feel like I have to get in touch with some lawyers in my own area and see what they're doing differently.
Yeah, see, I don't know. It's family law for sure. So,
Interesting. Very interesting.
and also speaking of that, like in a domestic violence case, you don't have to see your abuser in the courtroom.
Yes.
You don't have to be standing in the courtroom with the person. You're on Zoom and you can turn your camera off and ignore them. And so it's really
Absolutely. That is a
interesting.
plus. Yeah, it's a real plus. That's amazing. It's really interesting to hear how technology has changed things in a good way in that respect. Um,
Except
what
it probably
authors have
doesn't
you?
make it probably doesn't make very good legal scenes in a book though.
Oh, well, yeah, but somebody might have to write it in if they happen to, I don't
Yeah.
know, somebody's camera could go haywire. People could screw with it and they could have cat ears, whiskers. I gotta ask, what authors have you found most inspirational for your own work and that you admire?
I just go back to 101 lawyer like Grisham and Ludlum and those guys.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, they're like the icons and this is kind of how it rolls out. So I'd say those would be the ones.
And what are you working on now?
So right now I'm two things. I'm working on the fourth book in the series, which is going to be about a domestic violence victim who kills her abuser. And then I'm also working on, I decided I wanted to learn about like screenplays and stuff. And so I thought maybe my third book would make a good movie. And so I ended up getting connected to this movie producer who also, interestingly, is formerly incarcerated. So he
Huh.
was very, very interested in this story. And
Yeah.
the more we worked together, the more we decided it's probably better for a TV series because it's like this Camille Delaney series can go on forever. So he connected me to a friend who's a TV writer. And so I've been learning about TV screenwriting, which is
Mhm.
way different than writing a book, as you
Oh,
probably
yeah.
know. And so he was like coaching me for about 6 months and, going through all this and doing the pitch and all that kind of stuff. At the end of 6 months, he says, well, I'm trying to figure out where we should go next. And I said, well, I'm open. Like, I don't know anything about this. And he goes, well, how about I become your partner instead of your coach? Because I think this is good and I can turn it into something good. And I'm like, well, thank God, because I've reached my capacity of figuring out how to write a TV show. So anyway, so I'm working with him on that. And I know that's a total, long shot crapshoot, but who knows? Maybe I'll figure it out.
You never know. You just never
I think.
know. As um, William Goldman said, nobody knows anything. You never know what might hit or
Yeah, and I
whatever, you
think
know?
seems like there's always a market for lawyers. It's sort of like Aaron Brockovich meets the Lincoln
Hmm.
Lawyer. It's kind of like that.
Aaron Brockovich meets
The Lincoln Lawyer, which is a
the
TV
Lincoln
series.
Lawyer.
Yeah,
Yes. Oh my gosh, that sounds very promising. I like that pitch. That's
right?
good. I'm working on something that's kind of like Aaron Brockovich meets Suburgatory.
Oh
Kind
dear.
of. It's different. It's interesting. It's a short screenplay that
Oh, cool.
I'm
Yeah, I
hoping
saw you're a
to.
screenwriter, so you probably, I'm very new to this, so it's different.
It very. Oh my God, I have spent literally the last 15 years learning this craft, and
Yeah.
it is very different, yet so similar in certain ways, yet very, very different.
Yeah, like everything has to be so tight
Right?
and you can't talk about internal dialogue. It's all
Nope.
got to be dialogue and
Just what you
action and
see.
people's face. Now I can see why actors are so important because I'm like,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
they communicate a lot more than if they're good at it, you don't even know they're doing it, right? Like,
Exactly, exactly. What's really interesting is I just directed my first short film.
oh, wow,
So
tell me
I
about
got
that.
to actually work with
Oh,
the actors. So it was the best experience of my life. I really enjoyed it. It was tough, but it was something that I really wanted to try.
that's
And so
cool.
I feel like that's just opened up a new something for me. I don't know what exactly. We'll see. Right
What kind
now,
of film?
it's a short film about 10 minutes long about a priest who was a former assassin, basically, who turned to the priesthood to basically hide from the people he was working for. And 20 years later, somebody comes to him to confess something, and it turns into a confrontation where he has to atone for his sins in a sense, kind of face what he's done, face the consequences of what he's done.
Wow,
And it's called Absolution.
that's
Anyway,
intense.
yeah, it's pretty intense. It was pretty intense,
Yeah, that's
but
cool.
it's short and I'm in post-production at this point, which means I'm going to be editing it.
Wow,
Um,
good for you. So
yeah, it's like,
more technology skills.
yeah, it's absolutely. I'm doing things that I never would have thought
That's
possible,
awesome.
or even
That
that
is,
I even imagined doing. You know, like when you said about going to law school, I did not go to college thinking, "Gee, I'm going to go to law school after this." I took journalism ultimately, and it's like, okay, I don't really want to be a reporter. What do I want to do? And I happen to meet my husband's cousin is married to a lawyer. I just happened to have a talk with him and he was telling me about his work. And I thought, gee, that sounds like I'm not going to be bored. I didn't want to be bored, but I wanted to be paid.
well, and
So,
I think people that don't go to undergraduate school to be lawyers, people like you and me, we make better lawyers because you have a different perspective because you're not sort of brainwashed into this whole, the kids that come up out of, what do they call it? pre-law classes or
Yes,
I came out
yes.
of there, I didn't know, I didn't know what the Constitution hardly even was because I was all in hard sciences and journalism, sort of you're in writing. So it gives you a different perspective on the law if you didn't come up, as a sort of true believer. Because it gives you like, wait, what? You're doing it? What? Why are we doing that?
Exactly. It gives you a whole different perspective on the system, the
Totally
process,
does.
everything.
Hmm.
And I also wrote more concisely than anybody I could think of in my law school class. When I was working at
Oh yeah.
EPA, there was a supervisor who would red pencil everybody's stuff, tighten this, tighten this. She would just look at my stuff and go, "You write, you are an exemplary writer."
And
Like,
that's what lawyers
whoa,
do. That's such a big part of our job. So
it's
being a journalist
huge.
before a
Yeah.
writer is amazing. That's awesome.
Choosing the right words is so important. She
And
said.
ditching the adjectives.
Oh my gosh. Yes, it's more work than people imagine, I think, being a lawyer. It just is. Well, I just want to thank you so much for being here. Oh, is there anything, do you have any advice to give for people who would like to get into writing? I always like to end up with that question. And another question.
Yeah, I would say that to me, find something that you're pissed off about because
Yes.
that will compel you to want to write something that is like interesting and persuasive. Because, like, for me, it was I get really pissed off about the inequities in the criminal legal system or in the legal system in general. And it pushes me to want to, like, it's writing with a purpose. For me, I could never probably just write a book about a family or something, unless I had a personal family issue that, compelled me. But I think if you have something that you want to communicate about that you're pissed off about, I think that's a weird way of saying it, but really, I think that gives you this, then you have a mission, then you're on a mission. And
Yeah.
your writing is more interesting and compelling because there's a reason why you're doing it.
Yes. You found your why. That's another
Mhm.
thing they talk about a lot in screenwriting. What is your why? Why are you
Yeah.
writing
Why
this
does a
thing?
character do that? That's what
Yeah, motivations.
I
Yes.
was working with this coach. I know you got to go, but he was saying, we would go through this why, and finally one day he says, "Do you kind of feel like you're in therapy?" And I'm like, "Yes."
Yes. It is a bit like tearing your guts out when you do this stuff.
Yeah, it is.
Um, is there anything you'd like to add before we finish up?
Well, I don't think so. It's been super interesting. It's always nice to talk to a fellow lawyer, author, writer, screenwriter type person. So I didn't
Amen.
realize we
Thank
had so
you.
much in common, but this has been super fun. So thanks for having
Fantastic. Well, this is wonderful. I'm so glad you decided, to sign up here and be on. So
me.
thank you very much for being here today,
My
Amanda.
pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it was my pleasure, believe me. To everyone who is watching or listening, don't forget that we have a Patreon page. And on Patreon, you get all sorts of extras if you become a patron. Bonus episodes, ad-free episodes, and more. Also, check out the Crime Cafe 9-book set and short story anthology, which you can find on my Patreon page. Until next time, when my guest will be Patrick Moore, take care and happy reading. Be seeing you.